gonna throw. One-on-one, Davis has it. Touchdown! Carolina wins! Carolina is the Coastal Division champion! Javonte Williams to the left of Howe. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howe looking, standing tall, lets it go, man there! Touchdown! Touchdown, Carolina! The pistol, Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson, he tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted! Surratt intercepts it! Holy cow, Carolina's gonna win! And off to Javonte Williams again, pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back, pressure coming, Aguilar floats it up, incomplete, no flags, head on back up the mountain. Carolina wins it in double overtime.
Loftus out of the shotgun, throws to the end zone, incomplete, incomplete, the bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it, 47-45 in double overtime. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys as always. And tonight, going over the commitment of Gio Lopez, which was last night. Then, a commitment earlier today from Leavon Johnson along the defensive line. What do we think about that addition here for Carolina as they try to find some help in that defensive line group? And then an addition to the defensive line that'll be coming in 2026. So we got to wait a year, but a commitment to their 2026 class for Carolina. What do we think about that? And how important do we think that is for Carolina? What does that do now for the 2026 recruiting class with 3 defensive linemen already committed? We'll tell you about that here on this edition. But as I mentioned, Gio Lopez is the big news. Carolina ends up actually landing him after, Carolina was predicted to land him in the early part of this week back on Monday. Carolina now since has wrapped this one up officially. It happened last night. Carolina gets it done, and they've got the South Alabama quarterback coming their way. We talked a little bit about him on yesterday's edition of the podcast. And, ultimately, I think what we settled on was that, we do like some of the things that Gio Lopez can do, but we are a little bit concerned about the upside of him and how high his ceiling actually is. Is this a guy who has a similar ceiling to what we've seen from a guy like Bryce Baker already? Again, he flashed, I thought, on Saturday in the practice like a pro event. I really did think that you saw some really good arm strength from him. I thought as the night went along, the decision-making got better from him. I know people were complaining about how long he was holding on to the football, but the thing is that, Carolina's defensive line wasn't able to get into that backfield, gave him a little bit more time. And ultimately, that's what you're hoping is going to happen this year for Carolina, regardless of which quarterback is back there, because the quarterback that you're getting now is a guy that likes to tuck and run, and you don't want him having to do it too often. So you're going to have to protect your quarterback and give him some time to throw. I thought you saw some really good traits from Bryce Baker that you can build off of. And the hope is that, you bring in Gio Lopez. He comes in for, to compete at least this offseason with Bryce Baker. And hell, if Bryce Baker beats him out, then Bryce Baker beats him out. And then you're not really having to have the conversation that we were having yesterday about whether or not Carolina is going to be able to keep Bryce Baker. But if Gio Lopez does win the starting job, I think what you're envisioning is that eventually Bryce Baker will get to the point where he's playing well enough that he eventually takes back over for Gio Lopez, because we just don't think that Gio Lopez's ceiling is nearly as high as Bryce Baker's is. Bryce Baker, I think, has a chance to be a really special player in the ACC, one of the best quarterbacks that Carolina has ever had, and that's based off of what we saw at the high school level. I mean, you look at it, certain sites had Bryce Baker ranked higher than they had Sam Howell coming out of high school, and higher than they had Drake May even coming out of high school on certain websites. So that shows you the type of talent that Carolina has at their quarterback spot right now, and their true freshman that, is as of right, that would have been the starter had Carolina not been able to go out and land Gio Lopez after the transfer of Ryan Brown. But now you've got some competition in that room for him in the form of Gio Lopez. You look at last year for Gio Lopez, 206 of 312, ultimately a 66% completion percentage, which is a really solid number. You go back to the previous year, the limited snaps that you saw him, I mean, that's completion percentage really is on par with that 67.2% back as a true freshman back in 2023, and the limited games that he saw really flashed, in that freshman season in the bowl game against Eastern Michigan. He was phenomenal in that game, and that was really what led to Gio Lopez being a guy that, even with Bishop Davenport being brought in last year to South Alabama to compete with him at that quarterback spot, ultimately it led to Gio Lopez beating him out and having the type of year that he had. He threw for 2,559 yards to go along with 18 touchdowns and just 5 interceptions. So did a really good job of taking care of the football. Didn't throw for as many touchdowns as I think you were expecting him to. But a part of that was because of how well he ran the football on the ground. 83 carries, 463 yards, which is 5.6 yards per carry, a very good number for a quarterback, and 7 touchdowns. And, you look at some of the performances that he had this year. I mean, in some of the games where South Alabama really performed incredibly well. I mean, you have a game where they scored 87 points. In that game, he threw 4 touchdowns, didn't have to throw the ball or run the ball a whole lot in that one, just 15 and 19 for 257 yards, but turned that into 4 touchdowns and no interceptions on the day. I mean, you look at some of the other performances, though. I mean, go to the season opener in a loss, granted, to North Texas, but it was a 52-38 loss. The offense did their part, 26 completions on 49 attempts for 432 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Also ran the ball on that day for 62 yards and a touchdown. That was the most yards that South Alabama has ever had from a quarterback in that game. And I mean, you look at some of the other performances that he had outside of that, because you may be saying, well, that was a game we saw a 53.1 completion percentage in that one. I mean, one of the games that I think you have to go to is the LSU game. Granted, South Alabama loses 42-10 in that one, but he still goes 17 of 23 for 173 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions, ran the ball 10 times for 33 yards. And look, LSU is one of the stiffer defenses that they faced all year long. It was the only Power 4 school that they ended up playing. So you can't really get another mark to gauge it against, because they didn't go to a bowl game. You would have liked to get another non-conference game in there, maybe another game against Power 4 competition. But those numbers are pretty solid. Those are numbers that you can build upon at Carolina. And, LSU's defense still, to this day, one of the tougher ones, even though, their offense has been a big part of their struggles over the years. I know, last year got a little bit better with Garrett Nussmeier there, and it depends on how good their running games are. LSU is always going to field a talented defense, especially going up against the South Alabama team that's coming out of the Sun Belt. So I thought that, Gio Lopez in that game really did perform pretty well. And, some of the other games, I mean, as the season goes along, he had multiple games with over 300 yards of total offense. Arkansas State, throws for 292 yards and runs for 54. Also the game against Georgia Southern, 257 yards passing in that game, 43 yards on the ground. But ultimately, this is a guy that, the mobility is a big part of his success. And I think that that's something that we have seen with the last two quarterbacks at times for Carolina that succeeded at a high level in Sam Howell and Drake May. I think definitely with Sam Howell. And when you turn on the tape of Gio Lopez, you see a little Sam Howell to him. That was the first thing I thought when I watched him. And some people may say, well, why were you so concerned about him? And again, I want to make it clear that I'm focused on the upside of the player. And I think that Bryce Baker's upside is probably just a little bit higher than Gio Lopez. I do question, just how productive he was in the Sun Belt. I mean, again, those numbers, not bad, but you would figure that in the Sun Belt, especially with the type of offense that he had, he would have thrown for more touchdowns. Running for more touchdowns, I think maybe is a little too much to ask for. But I think especially throwing the football, you were hoping that he would throw the football for a few more touchdowns if you were going to feel overly confident in him. That's my point, is that this is still a guy that, even though he has some of the traits of Sam Howell, even though he is a tremendous runner, I mean, after contact averaged 4.4 yards per carry after contact this year, which as a quarterback is phenomenal. You don't see many quarterbacks that are going to take that type of physicality and keep going like he did over and over again last year. They're going to be able to pick up that many yards. I mean, those are yards that you're seeing from some of your running backs. Those are yards that you would expect from a guy like Amarian Hampton after contact, and that was coming from a quarterback. That was one of the things that we saw with Sam Howell back in his final season in Chapel Hill, was that he was a guy that was going to run the football like a running back at times. He was the guy that really controlled things offensively for Carolina, both in the passing game and in the running game. I think you could be looking at a similar situation with Gio Lopez if he is your starting quarterback, where he is kind of controlling everything. And he's a guy that plays a lot out of the shotgun. I do wonder how that's going to fit in with the system that Bill Belichick and Freddie Kitchens are wanting to run, which is more of an under center offense at times, especially in the red zone. But I think that's something that Gio Lopez will be able to adjust to. The other thing that you're going to have to adjust to is the fact that he rolls out to his left. As a left-handed quarterback, there are some challenges. Teams are going to have to get used to, your own teammates rather, are going to have to get used to running a lot of their plays to the other side of the formation. Carolina had two right-handed quarterbacks that were taking the majority of the snaps in the spring. They didn't have Arturi Newkirk, who's a left-hander. That could have helped Carolina at times. And they didn't have Max Johnson out there throwing to him. Now, some of the guys that played with Max Johnson last year, they'll be used to it. And that's something that you'll see extend over. But I think that's something that you do wonder, how quickly do they adjust to that? And, of course, how quickly does Gio Lopez learn the offensive playbook? It's going to take some time. There's no doubt about that. We saw it last year with Jacoby Criswell. But what do Bill Belichick and his staff, what approach do they take to that? Do they take a similar approach where they say, look, he's going to need the time to learn the playbook. We're not going to rush him through things and try to get him ready to start the season. He'll be the guy that'll be there if we need him after the regular season starts, with a guy like Bryce Baker under center. Or are they going to look at it as, hey, he doesn't really need nearly as much time. We're going to simplify a lot of the things, and we're going to make it easy for him to come in here and take over the starting job. I think it'll probably be the latter, because I really do think that they look at him as the guy that can be the starter for them. But regardless, he is going to have a learning curve that he's going to have to navigate, and do so pretty quickly with the playbook that Carolina is going to have out there for him. Some of the other things that I really like about him, I think the arm strength is definitely there. You see it, if you go back and watch South Alabama's highlights against Northwestern State, the game that they put up 87 points in, you could see it there. A couple of the throws that he made in the game against App State, I think, shows just how good of an arm he has as well. And that's one of the games that I went back. Those were the two games I really went back and watched the highlights on to get, sort of a view of what exactly Carolina was getting in him. And, some of the other highlight tapes that I saw of him, some of the little highlight packages that were put together with some of the other analysts that were talking about him, you see a good, quick release of the football. He does a good job of being able to get the ball out of his hands very quickly, utilizes those short passes, which, we've seen that Carolina's quarterbacks are going to have to do. That's one of the things that people are concerned about with Bryce Baker, is that he's a guy that's always looking for the bigger play down the field, holding the ball a little too long and not getting to those check down routes that you need to get to as a quarterback at this level. That's not going to be a problem for Gio Lopez. He knows, especially as a shorter quarterback, that he is going to have to get to those check down routes. Those are the easier routes that for him to see. And ultimately, I think it leads to a decent amount of success. I really like the way that he throws the football in the intermediate and short passing games. I think that's what allows him to be so accurate. And that's something that Carolina really needs after last year, where Jacoby Criswell wasn't necessarily the most accurate quarterback. Now, the thing is that when you look at accuracy, that's one of the big strengths of Bryce Baker as well. And so that's why I think this is going to be an interesting competition to monitor, to see how long it actually is a competition. If it is a competition, this could be one where Bill Belichick and his staff come out and announce that, hey, it's not a competition. This is going to Gio Lopez because he is the better quarterback. He's the more experienced quarterback at this point. But I really do think that it is in the best interest of Carolina to let these two battle. That will help Bryce Baker grow. And also, maybe grow Gio Lopez a little bit and turn him into a guy that is built to play at this level. I think if you're wondering about the transition to this level like I am, the one thing that comforted me that I read today was that Carolina, they had been in contact with him since March, which is certainly an interesting fact. Shows you that, this is what is going on in this day and age of college football right now. If you want somebody, you are going to be in contact with them in some form or fashion, no matter what time of year it is. But in that article that was written earlier today, they did say that, look, Georgia and LSU were both in on him. They wanted him to come in and compete for the starting job, where Carolina, they didn't specify whether or not he was coming in to compete for the job, but that would make you think that Carolina is probably looking at him and telling him, we believe that you will be our starter if you come here. And that's part of the reason why they're paying him $2 million. So I'll be interested to see, how quickly they end up calling this quarterback race now that they've got Gio Lopez in there. But I do think that, even if you are someone like me that really likes Bryce Baker, is afraid of losing him, there are some things to like about the game of Gio Lopez, who is basically, a little bit shorter version and a left-handed version of what Sam Howell was here in Carolina. I think that's going to be the comparison that you're going to hear a lot. And another one that Andrew Jones of Tar Heel Illustrated, who was on earlier today on the radio station that I work for here in Charlotte, WFNZ, he said that he compares him to Diego Pavia. And man, Diego Pavia, I think, is a tremendous comparison for him as well. Pavia, shorter quarterback, another one of those tough-nosed guys that really used his legs a lot, and that's what really allowed him to succeed at this at the Power 5 level or Power 4 level. Excuse me, I still always get that mixed up with Vanderbilt this past season. I mean, you go back and look at some of the stats that Diego Pavia put up this past year, and I mean, if you can get to a similar range, I mean, this past year, didn't throw for a ton of yards. Completion percentage was 59.4, which was about where his completion percentage was coming in. So if you imagine that Gio Lopez still completes around 66% of his passes, Pavia threw for 2,293 yards, 20 touchdowns, and had just 4 interceptions. And then you go to the rushing yards. Now, this is where I think he's a little bit different, because you go back to 2023 when he was at New Mexico State, ran the ball 176 times, which is far more than you saw from Gio Lopez, for 923 yards and 7 touchdowns. This past year, carried the ball 192 times for 801 yard and 8 touchdowns on the season. So I think, if Gio Lopez is going to succeed at this level, that might be one of the areas that you see him sort of increase his production is as a runner. So it will be interesting to see whether or not he follows in similar footsteps. I think, getting towards that 3,000 total yard mark that you had with Diego Pavia, who got just over that this past year, and getting, in that range of 28 total touchdowns, I think that would allow Carolina to have some pretty nice success. And I think we would all take that, especially after what you had to deal with last year with all the different quarterbacks rotating in. And I think that's the one thing, is that if it's going to happen at Carolina this year where they're going to start out with one quarterback and then go to another one, just make it that. Just have it be where Carolina goes from the one starting quarterback to the next starting quarterback, and then that's it. But I think Gio Lopez has a chance to be a really solid starter here. I just wonder how many games he can win for Carolina this year with, the limitations that he seems to have at times with his passing game. That's the only thing that you wonder. You move on to Lavon Johnson along the defensive line. He was a guy that joined earlier today out of Maryland. He committed and signed with the Tar Heels today. So that's a big step too, is that Carolina not only getting the commitment from him, but getting him to sign. And this is a nice addition for Carolina, just in terms of the other teams that were going after him. Teams like Texas, who actually hosted him for a visit on Thursday, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, and a handful of other Power 4 programs were going after him. Now, again, his stats aren't really going to blow you away. He's a guy that, in 2023 played 120 snaps on the defensive side of the ball over the course of 10 games and finished with 5 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 1 sack, and a quarterback pressure. This season, where he saw his role expand a little bit when he played 164 snaps in just 8 games, he collected 14 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and 3 quarterback pressures. So much more impactful in the middle of that defensive line. Definitely a guy that's going to be a primary run defender. His numbers, on Pro Football Focus aren't going to wow anybody. I mean, you look at 2024, and his overall grade is 64.8. Not bad, but not great either. You look at the run defense grade of 61.8. Again, solid, but nothing that you should be writing home about, especially for a guy that if you are looking at him to potentially be a starter. His tackling grade is pretty high at a 70.3. He missed just 1 tackle the entire season, and his pass rush grade just a 60.5. But he's being brought here to try to help Carolina tackle in the run game. And really, he's being brought in just to get another body in that room, because Carolina is, one, incredibly small in that room. He's 6'2", 311 pounds. That's more what you're looking for on the defensive line. That's more the body makeup that you're looking for on your defensive line. And for Carolina, I mean, you've got CJ Mims, who was with you, that you got out of the transfer portal. That's a guy that I know the staff really likes. But outside of him, there's not really a lot of answers. Rodney Laura is a guy that's been on the roster for a few years now. Redshirt sophomore. It's time for him to hopefully take a little bit of a leap. But Joel Starlings, his former classmate, he actually enters the transfer portal himself. And that's a guy at 6'4", 320 pounds that fit more of that body style that Carolina is looking for. And with him gone, you're counting on a lot of young guys in that room to have to step up. I mean, the only other guys that even have any sort of experience at the college football level, just in terms of going through camps, are Leroy Jackson, the redshirt freshman who is in his second year out of the state of Georgia. And then Peter Pasansky, another redshirt freshman who didn't see any snaps last year out of the state of Florida. I mean, both of those guys never saw the field last year. Leroy Jackson actually got shut down in the middle of the season with an injury. And so you're relying on a lot of guys. I mean, this is a position where Carolina had multiple walk-ons at this position here during the spring because they simply didn't have enough guys. That's part of the reason why Carolina went and added as many guys to the 2025 class as they did along the defensive line. Guys that, if we're being honest, these are not players that are going to be able to help Carolina this year. There's going to be a lot of time needed for some of these guys to develop. Maybe they actually end up doing that, but really it was just about trying to get as many guys in that room as physically possible because Carolina just doesn't have enough guys there now. The only one that I think as a late addition might be able to help Carolina this year is Nico Maggio, but even him, 6'1", 270 pounds, love the physicality that he plays with, but I don't know if he's going to be able to contribute for Carolina right away. So they've got to get guys in this room that, one, fit the body style that you need along the defensive line, and two, are going to be able to have some sort of impact. I don't know ultimately what Leavon Johnson is going to be able to do here. I do think that you wonder if this is a year where if he had stuck with Maryland, he maybe starts to get up into the 200s, 300s in terms of snaps. And what does that translate to? Is he a guy that continues to add up some of those tackles? I mean, if you can get 20 tackles in the middle, you'd like to get a few more tackles for loss in there. But Carolina, again, is just looking for a body in there that has played before and that can actually get out there and contribute for Carolina in some form or fashion, really just take up snaps, because that position this year, I mean, it's going to be really hard, guys, to see this team being a good run defending team. They did not do what they needed to do in the middle of that defensive line. They should have went out. They should have spent the money that they had, but they've been bargain shopping for a lot of these guys. They have not wanted to spend money. That's why they went out and got CJ Mims, as opposed to going out and getting a big name or bringing back a guy like Travis Shaw. They simply wanted new blood in there. But I think, we talked about it, how disappointing over the last few years guys like Travis Shaw and Jahvaree Ritzie had been, based off of what they were supposed to be coming out of high school. We thought that these guys were supposed to be the stars along the defensive line. Well, you're going to find out just how valuable those guys were over the last few years when Carolina takes the field for that game against TCU, because I think that TCU and a lot of other teams are probably going to be able to run all over this unit. Johnson hopefully is a guy that can come in and help you right there. But, I mean, you look at those stats, and that's not something that's really blowing you away. So this is definitely an area that Carolina needs to continue to work on. I know that every day you're seeing guys that are entering the transfer portal that are former, four-star type of prospects. Those are the guys that you have to take risks on. If they are measuring in at the right height and weight, if they are guys that fit what you're looking for in terms of body style and play style, you've got to be willing to take risks on these guys. That's what I think Carolina has to do at this point, because right now they just don't have the guys necessary on that defensive line to be able to succeed the way that they need to. And that goes for edge rusher as well. That's another spot where Carolina, especially after losing Bo Atkinson, now they need to be aggressive. They have to go out there and find somebody else, because I think that you love what Price Yates brings. He's going to be a guy that at one of those edge rusher spots, I think is going to be a difference maker for Carolina coming in. And I thought that coming into the season. But now you need somebody on that other side that's going to attract some of the attention away from him, or else he's going to get double teamed a lot. Is that Milcard Abu-Jowdy? Is he able to take that leap from what he did at Delaware, where he had 6.5 sacks a year ago? I mean, those are solid numbers, but not, a guy that you would be expecting to be a starter at the Power 4 level for your team and be able to succeed at the level that he needs to be able to attract the type of attention that they're going to need to free up Price Yates. And Smith Vilbert, a guy that was a nice addition for Carolina, we thought at the time, because he was going to be a rotational piece behind Bo Atkinson and Price Yates, now is looked at as a guy that's going to be challenging for one of these starting jobs. And, the thing with Smith Vilbert is that, the production at times was there at Penn State. Really, I mean, during that 2021 season, that was his most productive year when he had 3 sacks and 4 tackles for loss. He had 4 tackles for loss this past year, but all those are in rotational snaps. The most snaps that he's ever played in a season is in the 300s. I mean, that's, again, another guy very similar to Bo Atkinson last year, and maybe with extended snaps, he ends up breaking out, but he's a guy that I think similar to is not necessarily going to be the same type of guy as Bo Atkinson, because you look at what Bo Atkinson was able to do in those limited reps. I mean, yeah, he was a guy that was able to get after the quarterback pretty consistently. I mean, had 25 quarterback pressures a year ago where for some reason Smith Vilbert not pulling up right now as I'm trying to look for him here on Pro Football Focus to see how many reps he had or how many pressures he had. Just 6 total last season. So he played 339 snaps, had 6 total pressures a year ago, including 1 sack. Meanwhile, Bo Atkinson in 381 snaps last year, much more productive with 25 total quarterback pressures, 7.5 sacks, 12 tackles for loss. So that's a huge drop-off going to a guy in Vilbert that, maybe being in the ACC helps him out a little bit, but what's the ceiling for him? 4 sacks and maybe 8 tackles for loss, that's simply not going to be enough for Carolina, and that's certainly not going to allow Price Yates to have the type of season that we thought he was going to be capable of having. So to me, that's a position that you have to go out and try to find a big name at. And then the defensive line. Hell, if you can find 2 names on the defensive line that are big names, then I think you go out and you grab those guys as soon as you can. I know they're still looking potentially for depth at the linebacker spot, although they did get yesterday Makai Bayor. I mispronounced his name yesterday, wanted to make sure that I got it right today and corrected that. But he's a guy that was a former starter. He's going to be there with Amari Campbell and Kamori House, but they're saying they're still looking for even more depth at the linebacker position just because of the fact that Carolina lost some of that depth to the transfer portal. So I think that's an area that Carolina is still looking for. And then maybe even in that secondary, potentially adding to that safety room, just get some more experienced depth back there. I think that would be something that Carolina would be interested in, with a lot of young guys, a lot of guys that haven't played a lot of snaps back there this season. So a lot of holes on the defensive side of the ball for Carolina. Hopefully they will be looking to fill them here over the next couple of weeks or so with some of the guys that are there available in the portal. All right, we get to the commitment in the 2026 class today. That would be 2026 3-star defensive lineman Jimmy-Phrisco Alo-Suliafu, who committed to Carolina after his official visit over the weekend to Chapel Hill, was one of 9 targets that were on campus for their official visit. Alo-Suliafu chose the Tar Heels over offers from Auburn, Miami, Michigan, Oklahoma, and others. Comes out of the state of Texas, ranked as the number 560 prospect overall and the number 61 defensive lineman in the 2026 class, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite Player Rankings. He hails from Katy Jordan High School in Fulshear, Texas. Last year, easily his most productive year at the high school level. 70 total tackles, 15 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, 3 quarterback hurries, 2 passes defensed, 1 forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. He did earn all district honors for his performance, a first-team all-district member at that. That was after playing just 3 games in 2023. Believe there was an injury that he suffered, and you go back to his freshman year. I mean, he's been playing since his freshman year. He was a part of the varsity team at Katy High School, but unfortunately, those stats are not available. When you throw on the film, though, for him, first of all, 6'3", 265 pounds. For an edge rusher, that's perfect size. That's, the same size as what Bo Atkinson was, in that same range. Similar size for Price Yates. That's the area that Carolina is going to be looking for the majority of their edge rushers to be at, guys that are physically able to set that edge and have a little bit of weight on them. So I love the size that he brings. If he's going to stick at that edge rusher role, if not, he's going to have to put on a little more size if he's going to kick inside. But the thing is he's very versatile. Succeeds on the inside, really, despite not having the size. Did a really good job of that. This past year was matched up down there, probably I'd say about 50% of the snaps. I think they did a good job of mixing it up between how they used him as a stand-up edge rusher at times and then putting his hand in the dirt and kicking him inside. Really like his release off the line of scrimmage, especially for a guy his size. I mean, look, it's not going to be someone that's going to jump off the page with how quickly they're getting off the line of scrimmage, but it definitely is something that will give issues to slower tackles and guards. His speed, not mind-blowing, but I mean, he does have the willingness and want to be able to track down guys and make plays. Talked about it so many times with the last recruiting class that Carolina had in 2025, with the guys that they brought in under Bill Belichick. Those guys all had high motors. This is another guy that fits along that same mold. He plays with an impressive level of physicality, especially for someone of his size. I think that physicality is outstanding. Really does a good job of throwing his body into the fray, and uses his arms very well. He does a good job of locking out his arms, pushing the offensive lineman back, and then being able to shed them and throw them aside when he needs to be able to make those plays in the backfield. Really like the technical pass rushing moves whenever he does mix them in. I think that's what you really like about it, is that he doesn't use those technical pass rushing moves all the time. He uses them when he needs to. And, that keeps teams on their feet when they're trying to figure out what he's going to do when he's out there. So I really like that, how he mixes that in with the power, and it really helps him shed blocks, which he does a great job of. I think the biggest thing for him is going to be figuring out what position you want him to play, and it is going to probably take a little bit of time for him to navigate the learning curve that is normal for a lot of these guys that coming from the high school level and stepping up to the Power 4 level of football. The step up in physicality, I think, will certainly be something that we'll have to see. How does it translate? But I do think that this is a nice multi-year contributor for Carolina once he gets to Chapel Hill. I do think that there's a lot to like about him there. I would keep him at edge rusher. I think there's enough there. 8 sacks, very solid, 15 tackles for loss, does a really good job of setting the edge in the run game. That was one thing I didn't put in my breakdown up here, but I should have. Does a great job of being able to set that edge in the run game because he doesn't get too wide. Does a really good job of bringing that physicality to be in position when he needs to then shed the block and make the tackle on these guys in the backfield. So really like what we see from him, as a 3-star prospect, a guy that's in the 500s, pretty high-end 3-star prospect. I think this is a nice addition for Carolina along the defensive line. And I think what it does is now Carolina with 3 commitments along the defensive line in this class, I do think that this is an addition that, still allows you to look for that bigger defensive lineman. So a lot of people, when they see these types of commitments and they look at the position group, they're saying now, well, Carolina's got 3 guys at that defensive lineman spot. Is there going to be room for Carolina to add somebody else? And I think there is going to be room for Carolina to add somebody else. I definitely think that is the case because, you look at Trayshawn Ruffin. He's a guy that, is just the space eater in the middle, that run-stopping type that you want. And he's the headliner of this class still to this point right now. He's the guy that I think, at 6'2", 340 pounds, I mean, he is the exact height and weight that you're looking for from a guy that's going to be that space eater and fill the middle of your defense. Then you've got, the guy that Carolina just added in Jimmy-Phrisco Alo-Suliafu, who is 6'3", 265 pounds. That's a guy that's, going to be out there at edge rusher. for them at that size if he stays there. And then David Jackson, 6'2", 276 pounds. He's a guy that Carolina is going to be adding weight to, but he fits that pass rusher type of mold for Carolina out of the defensive tackle spot. Really good pass rusher. So there you go. You've got guys that are, all different types of players along that defensive line. And I think Carolina is still going to be looking to add at least one more edge rusher, if not more. And the defensive line, this is an area that if you're thinking that Carolina's done here, you just need to take a look at that group as we talked about them here just a second ago. There is not the depth at that position right now. And you're looking for guys that are going to come in and potentially be rentals, even for just a year, that can help you out for this season. You're trying to go into the 2026 class and find guys that can make immediate contributions along the defensive line at that defensive tackle spot. And I think that you're hoping that, some of the guys that Carolina's targeting, Avadny Cleveland, one of the guys that, on the Spaces chat that I was on just about a week ago now, a little over a week ago now, when talking with Trayshawn Ruffin, he said that was one of the guys that he was most looking to try to get to be a part of this class for Carolina. You look at some of the guys that, Carolina had on campus this past week that have big size, like a Manoa Falpusa, Joseph Pecco, both of those guys, 6'2", 6'3", respectively for them, both 310 pounds. Those are the types of guys that Carolina is looking at. Darrell Campbell, who will be on campus for an official visit later on in this summer. Another guy that's 6'2", 300 pounds. And even, some of the guys in state that Carolina's been talking to, like Noah Clark, 6'4", 330 pounds. That'd be another guy that Carolina would like to add. Just get as much talent as you possibly can, get as much size as you possibly can into that room and see what sticks there. I think that's the big goal for Carolina right now, because they simply don't have that size going into this season, and that's what's ultimately going to hurt them. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast, guys. Want to thank all of you guys who tuned in. So make sure that you make sure that you check this out. Someone's saying, by the way, that right now, somebody in the comments here, actually multiple people in the comments here, saying that Leavon Johnson actually just flipped to Texas. So sorry guys, I had multiple pages pulled up here while we were dealing with that. That's a loss for Carolina. Now back to square one at the defensive line spot. So again, you've got to add a ton of guys at that spot. I think here in this class, I'd like to see at least 2 or 3 more guys added at that defensive line spot here in this transfer portal class in the spring. But that's a huge loss for Carolina. So now ultimately, Carolina gets a commitment for half a day from a guy in Leavon Johnson. We knew that visit to Texas could be something. It's weird that he ended up committing to Carolina while on that visit and then ends up flipping to Texas. You would imagine that means that he was still on that visit during the time when he made that commitment. So thank you to Brett Weeks and Luby's Fat Life for pointing that out to me. That is, a tough loss for Carolina, who again was just trying to add as many bodies in there as you possibly can. And so now, Carolina's got to find some guys. There are a lot of names that have entered the transfer portal here in these last few days. But defensive tackle is the most important spot because, as of right now, I think you would project that it would probably be the 2 veterans in that room that would be starting in CJ Mims and Rodney Laura. Those 2 guys, Rodney Laura is a guy that we saw last year during the bowl game, didn't really break out by any stretch, didn't have necessarily a great game in that one. And, now you're going to be expecting him to take over as a starter. And at this rate, you're expecting him to take over as a starter and probably play the majority of the reps there, similar to sort of what we saw when Mac Brown came back to Carolina in that first season. Rodney Laura, a guy that played 7 snaps in the bowl game for Carolina, probably looked at right now as the starter at that defensive tackle spot. And alongside of him, CJ Mims, a guy who, started last year for East Carolina, but wasn't necessarily the most productive guy, a guy that we thought at the time when Carolina added him might be a starter. Maybe he ends up being a starter, but he played 339 snaps a year ago. In an ideal world, you would hope that Carolina doesn't have to play him that many or has to play him a similar amount of snaps, doesn't have to play him more snaps. But I think right now we're expecting that Carolina is going to have to play him a ton this upcoming season. And really those two guys are going to be the ones that you're going to be relying on. And you're hoping that other guys have really taken a massive step forward. Again, we have no idea whether or not they have, because Bill Belichick doesn't speak to the media. So unfortunately, there's not much information out there for us to tell you whether or not Peter Pisanski has gotten better, whether or not, Leroy Jackson has been better. If any of the true freshmen have come in and really started to light it up that are with the team here in the spring. And even, the top two guys, do we know that for sure we really like what CJ Mims is bringing? Same thing with Rodney Lora. Are those guys that are right now bringing what you need to that position room? We have no idea. So we're going to keep monitoring the situation, what's going on with Leavon Johnson. Hate to hear that really sucks for Carolina, because they were hoping that they would get a legitimately a guy with some legitimate size in there that had a little bit of upside to him, not even that much. I mean, again, that's how you know that Carolina is in really dire straits. This is a devastating loss for Carolina, and it's a guy that had 14 total tackles last year and 1 tackle for loss. But that's where Carolina's at in that room. So we're going to keep you up to date on all that. HeelToughBlog.com. Make sure you guys head over to the website, check all of that stuff out on the website. We're actually going to probably just take down that article for about Leavon Johnson. I'll quote it and make sure that people know that he is no longer committed to Carolina. But yeah, what a tough day for Carolina on that front. That really was a guy that Carolina, I think, was going to be counting on to come into this defensive line room and give them something this year. But the good news is we got that article up there about Gio Lopez that you guys can check out after he committed last night. We've got the article up there about Jimmy-Phrisco Alo-Suliafu. Hopefully one of those pronunciations that I have were the actual correct pronunciation of his name. I really do apologize if I got that wrong, but we've got that article up there about him, a guy that I really like as a 2026 edition for Carolina at the edge rusher spot. So make sure you check that out. And of course, any other news that comes out around the Tar Heel football program, whether it is with the transfer portal, with the 2026 class, or if there is anything that actually gets updated about the current team for 2025, we will have you covered on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Same thing for the basketball side of things. Carolina is still trying to piece together their roster for 2025-26. Still waiting on the announcement from Drake Powell. The minute that comes down, we'll have something on the website for you so that you guys can check that out. And then, of course, if Carolina has to move in a different direction, if he makes the decision to go to the draft, and they do have someone else that they target in the transfer portal, we'll, of course, have something up there for you about that. Same with any sort of recruiting news. Is Carolina now starting to turn their attention to the 2026 recruiting class on the basketball side of things? Josh will have you covered all offseason on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. And with everything that's going on right now, guys, we encourage you, go there morning, afternoon, and evening to check out all of the latest news for Carolina. Again, we will get an update up there as soon as possible for Leavon Johnson for you guys to be able to check out. But, any other news that's going on around the team, we have you covered as up to the minute as we possibly can. Again, both of us do have second jobs, so we are trying as hard as we possibly can to get those articles up as soon as possible. Best way to keep up with everything that we're posting, go to the Twitter page at HeelToughBlog. Give it a like, turn on the post notifications, that will allow you to receive a notification on Twitter anytime that we post something to the Twitter page, which that is the only thing that we post on that feed are our articles. So you'll get all of the latest news right in your inbox. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. Guys, make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to the podcast. If you are a listener, give us a rating and review as well. We'd really appreciate it. Do it the same for the Four Corners podcast as well. But for now, Anthony Pagnotta saying thank you guys for listening and watching. And as always, go Tar Heels.